And we are back for another edition of Black Tower Radio. I am your host, Jake Fox, and we are broadcasting live on 1040 AM, 92.1 FM, WYSL in Rochester, New York. Also on worldnewsradio.today. That's worldnewsradio.today. And we are joined here by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts is an American economist, journalist, blogger, and is best known for being the creator of Reaganomics. He is also the former editor of the Wall Street Journal. He was a distinguished fellow at the Cato Institute, graduate of Oxford University, Georgia Tech, University of Virginia. He's an ACC guy, I see. He likes to stick with the ACC, I guess. Syracuse is in the ACC, so it's not all bad now. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Roberts.
Thanks, Jake.
So, I wanted to lead off with this because you're an expert on Russia. You were tasked with creating, an economic warfare, I guess you could say, against Russia during the Reagan administration, while working in the Treasury Department. There's a big swell from the left to just make Russia look out to be this overwhelming threat. There's a red under every bed. They've hacked our elections. They own our president. Our president is they're pretty much saying our president is a foreign agent. They seem to have the cooperation of the intelligence community as well. And this is what scares me, because there's no proof for anything that they're saying. And I'm not taking sides here. Obviously anyone who listens to this broadcast knows that I call it as I see it. I'm not a Trump supporter. I am certainly not a Democrat. But this is just plain scary stuff. It seems like a coup is going on. What do you think, Dr. Roberts?
Well, what's happened is that when Trump said he was going to normalize relations with Russia, he threatened the $1,000 billion annual military security budget and all the power that goes with it. And what we saw instantly in response was the CIA and the military security complex launch a full-scale attack on Trump. They tried to prevent him from getting the Republican nomination. They tried to prevent him from being elected president, and now they're trying to either drive him from office or to force him off of that agenda. They've already succeeded in removing General Flynn, who supported better relations with Russia, and replacing him with a Russophobic idiot. So the real question before us is, will the CIA determine America's foreign policy, or will Trump, elected by the people, be able to deliver on his unique promise of better relations with Russia? Now the question is, why does the liberal progressive left support the CIA instead of peace with Russia? That is the real question. Historically, we know that the CIA has controlled the American and European media in regard to anything that affects the CIA's agenda. Does this control now reach into the liberal progressive left itself? What we have seen on the part of the few remaining left-wing websites, such as Counterpunch, was a sudden and abrupt change from support of the working class to support for identity politics, that is, victim groups, women, blacks, transgender, homosexuals, Muslim refugees. What explains that? All of a sudden, the working class became the Trump deplorables, racists, misogynists, homophobes. This is an extraordinary, sudden change. Does it simply show that the CIA can reach anywhere because of the money and or the threats? What we are faced with in this orchestrated creation of a Russian threat is the reversal of all the efforts dating back to John Kennedy, through Richard Nixon, through Jimmy Carter, through Ronald Reagan, to end the Cold War and normalize relations so that we would not have these tensions that could end up in a nuclear confrontation. Ever since Clinton, we've now had 6 presidential terms, 2 of Clinton, 2 of George W. Bush, and 2 of Obama, in which intentionally, purposefully, they have done everything possible to worsen relations with Russia and to raise these tensions to levels they never came close to in the Cold War. We now have a situation where the president of Russia himself declared, direct quote, Russia cannot trust the United States. Well, this is an immense threat to all of humanity. Because if there's no trust, and the warning systems give a false reading, the absence of trust means the reading is more likely to be believed. Unlike the entirety of the Cold War, when both sides received numerous false warnings, no one believed them because they were working together to reduce tensions. All the Russians have seen for 25 years out of Washington is provocations, lies, false accusations, abandonment of treaties, such as the anti-ballistic missile treaty, which the Bush regime unilaterally pulled out of with no warning. The change in war doctrine from nuclear weapons being a deterrent to being a preemptive first strike force. Everything we've done, putting anti-ballistic missile bases on Russia's border, false accusations against Russia, stealing our elections, hacking Hillary's emails, invading Ukraine, preparing to invade Poland, preparing to invade the Baltics. These things go on every day, over and over. 2 days ago, at the hearings before the House Intelligence Committee, both the director of the CIA and the director of the National Security Agency declared Russia was our principal enemy, a country determined to harm us. This is utter BS. Why are these lies repeatedly told? And what is the impact on Russia? they sit there and say, well, they must be preparing their populations for a war against us. What else is the purpose of these lies? Why are they doing this? They must be preparing the populations for a war against us. Now, this is the most irresponsible thing that can be done. And no one is complaining about it. Not the liberal progressive left, not the Democratic Party. They're all egging it on. Even the right-wing Republicans, McCain, Lindsey Graham, this new guy, this young new guy, what's his name? They are egging on conflict between nuclear powers. There's nothing more irresponsible. People need to understand that, they may not wake up one morning. The great incineration is hanging over our heads. The weapons today, compared to the pop guns we used on Japan, are so powerful. It only takes a handful of them to wipe the United States off the face of the earth. And there's no appreciation of this. It's all, the Russians, Putin, the threat. Look at what they call the president of Russia: a thug, the new Hitler, a mafia don, the tarantula in the center of the spy ring. We never spoke about Joseph Stalin that way, or Khrushchev, or Brezhnev, or Gorbachev. People would have been shocked. Anyone who did that would have been regarded as a threat to the existence of the American people. And yet today it's routine. Non-entities, people of no consequence, people you've never heard of, think that they can just go around with all these wild accusations. This is a serious situation. You won't get any mention of it in the prostitute media. This is what Congress should be investigating. Instead, they're investigating non-existent things like, did Putin use the internet media to steal the election? Non-existent conspiracies such as the Trump-Putin collusion to steal the election. And this is all coming from people who ridicule conspiracy theory. Look at their own conspiracy theory. This is the most ridiculous conspiracy theory I've ever heard of. A Trump-Putin conspiracy to steal the American election. I mean, the conspiracy was obvious. It was the conspiracy of the CIA, the FBI, the prostitute media, and the Hillary forces to steal first the nomination, the Democratic nomination from Bernie Sanders, second to steal the election from Donald Trump, and when they failed, now it's a conspiracy to delegitimize him and put him under their control or to drive him out of office. The true conspiracy is right there in front of our noses. It's obvious. There's endless evidence of it. Remember, the day before the November election, the director of the FBI announces that Hillary is cleared of all criminal suspicion. This was supposed to elect her. It had the opposite effect. But that's why it was done. So, Jake, that's the real situation in the world. It's not, we can't trust our own security agencies. They are operating against the elected president of the United States. It's obvious, it's transparent. We're experiencing a color revolution, an attempted coup against the president by the intelligence services. And it's really amazing that the liberal progressive left are part of that. So why do they support war? Why do they support conflict with Russia? Are they paid? You know, the German editor of the big newspaper wrote that book in 2014. It's called Bought Journalism. He said every journalist of any significance in Europe is on the CIA's payroll. Another book just came out here the other day, an English book written in English, written by a well-known writer who uses the names, examples, and shows how the CIA has traditionally controlled the important American journalists. I mentioned it in a recent column. So there you have it. Who rules? The military security complex. Their budget is enormous. Eisenhower warned us of the threat from the military security complex in 1961, more than a half century ago. Imagine how much more entrenched they are now after a half century of nobody doing anything whatsoever about it. The President, Trump, has found out that he is really not the president. And now his government's being filled up with generals and defense contractors. And so, what have we got? We've got rule by the military security complex.
How much power does the intelligence community, and particularly the CIA, have over the political class, do you think, Dr. Roberts?
I think it's total, because they can spy on everybody, on everything. They've got all the dirt. They know everything. And even if they don't have anything on somebody, they can assert that they do, because they never have to produce the evidence, because they say, oh, it's national security, or it will reveal how we found out. We can't tell you, we'll let foreigners see how we collect information. So they can make up anything they want, because they never have to produce the evidence. So if they don't have any evidence, they can still destroy the person. In many cases, they probably have evidence of affairs or taking bribes or who knows what, some indiscretion that the media would blow up, you know, beyond. They can make Mount Everest out of a molehill. That's what the media can do. We see it every day. And once it starts, the Americans, they haven't got enough sense to see what's happening. They say, oh, it must be a bad person. So I think the power is total, and I think that's what Trump is finding out. Look, we saw on the 20th of this month, wasn't it? The 20th? What was the day of the House Intelligence Committee hearing? It was the 20th, I think.
It was the 20th, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so we're talking about 2 days ago. We saw the director of the CIA and the director of the National Security Agency launch an all-out attack on the President of the United States. We saw them completely contradict Trump. They declared Russia was our dangerous enemy who intended to harm us. With no evidence. And now we learn they're going to investigate all of the social media, because social media was used by the Russians. They're starting with Alex Jones, Infowars, Breitbart, and of course the former head of Breitbart is Trump's main advisor in the White House, so you can see where that's going, what that's directed at. And what can Trump do? Nothing. Why does he fire these bastards? He can't. The American people don't have a government. They're ruled state, which is now asserting its power is coming to light, if anybody's capable of noticing.
They're starting to flex their muscle very publicly. It's in a very brazen way. It scares me. It seems like they're almost preparing us for a new normal. This is the reality. This is the way it is. They're preparing us to operate in this new normal. Stuff we've been talking about on this show for years. But the American people, are being prepared to live life believing what we've been and what you've been writing about for years, but in a very twisted, normalized sort of way. This is this benign, objective organization. We don't take bribes. We don't. We're not subject to big corporations' influence. We're the only objective arm within the government. I hear people saying things like that.
Look, they don't need bribes. They get $1,000 billion annually from the taxpayers. That exceeds the GDP of most countries on Earth. So what do they need bribes for? Now, what they're telling you is, look, we're in control, and there's nothing you can do about it. Look what we just did to the guy who threatened our budget and power. And you think you can change things with elections? Ha ha, joke's on you. And not only that, look, we can turn all the people against him. Look, we've got all the women out marching for war against Trump normalizing relations with Russia. We've got this happening all over the world, all over Europe. They're all marching against Trump. And you think you have a voice? We determine who has a voice. We overthrow whatever government we want, whenever we want. It's our history. We've done it so many times. We're complete experts at it. We have numerous books detailing. We have the book called The Brothers about John Foster and Allen Dulles. It lists the countries they overthrew. And it continues. We overthrew the government in Ukraine, the government in Georgia, the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. The government in Honduras was overthrown during the Obama regime. We're working currently to overthrow the government in Venezuela, Ecuador, and Bolivia. And I suspect they'll all three fall. So what we are seeing is that, look, you guys, we like the budget of $1,000 billion a year and all of the power that goes with it, and we're going to keep it. And so quit electing people who are getting in the way of that. And moreover, the justification for this budget is a threat. And we were really pissed off when the Soviet Union collapsed and we lost our threat. We tried to create a threat out of the Muslims, but they're just not a big enough threat. So we have recreated the Russian threat. And that's a fact. And it's going to stay a threat, and that's why Trump has to go or give up on his position. because we can't do without that threat, because otherwise we don't have any reason for $1,000 billion a year and all the power that goes with it. So that's the message. It's clear as day. Why Americans can't see this, it just blows my mind. But of course, what have they ever been able to see? Well, Jake, I think we've kind of covered it. There's really nothing else to say. I'll just end up repeating myself.
I just wanted to get your last thoughts on this. Where do you see this all going? What direction do you...
War. Nuclear annihilation.
Do you see them being even more brazen, the deep state, with
yeah, more brazen.
And the American people will accept it?
What can they do about it? Look, what can Europe do about it? What does Europe gain from conflict with Russia? Europe would be incinerated immediately. Wouldn't be any Europe there. NATO, what a joke. NATO. Russia can wipe out NATO in 5 minutes. And not only that, Russia and China have a strategic alliance. We'd be hit from both ends. I mean, the world simply would cease to exist. All because the military security complex wants to hold on to their $1,000 billion annual budget. Look, you see, the military security complex budget is not just the Pentagon's budget. It's also the Department of Energy, because that's where the nuclear weapons are. It's all 16 U.S. intelligence agencies. Yes, there's 16. There are aspects of the State Department that we use for subversion, such as the National Endowment for Democracy. There are the radio broadcasts, Radio Europe, Voice of America, that we use for subversion. There are the 700 or more U.S. military bases spread everywhere under various kinds of agreements. It's a massive amount of money and power, and has room for all kinds of fraud and theft and cost overruns. I mean, just look at the F-35. This is an airplane that cannot perform as well as the F-16 is supposed to replace. It's become an endless sinkhole of hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, what do you want to give up a life like that for if you're living it?
And Trump campaigned. I mean, that was one of the things he campaigned on. The F-35, how much waste it was. And now look at him. He was forced to buy a whole bunch of these F-35s that he campaigned against. It just makes me... It just reaffirms what I thought is, I don't think he's in...
See, people blame Trump, but you can't blame him. What you have to blame him for is thinking the president was powerful. He thought, he's a strong, tough man, and he thought if he had the office of the presidency, he could change things. And he's found out that a strong, tough man in the office of the presidency is no match for the deep state. And that's what I think we can take from this. And it's pointless to blame him, except because everybody else thought the same thing, didn't they?
I'm sure a lot of people got into office, like you just said, thinking they were going to change things or do whatever. But there's an old Bill Hicks joke. Bill Hicks is a is a comedian who died a couple decades ago. He said that when the newly elected president, gets in the office, the first day, the CIA shows him the other angle of the Kennedy assassination, the second camera. So they get the idea real quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a joke, but I mean, it's there's some truth base there.
Well, I think everyone who's ever studied it knows that Kennedy was murdered by the CIA, the Joint Chiefs, and the Secret Service.
Yeah, we live in very interesting times. I mean, Dr. Roberts, you're a guy who's seen a lot of things. You've been at the highest levels of government. Have you ever seen a time, just more weird and interesting than the time we live in right now?
I would put it differently. I'd say I've never seen a time as dangerous. This is an extremely dangerous time. This was the whole message I'm trying to deliver. We're in extreme danger because the Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama regimes have completely destroyed the ability of the Russian government and the Russian people to trust the United States. And we have convinced the Russian government that we are preparing to attack them with atomic weapons, nuclear weapons, thermonuclear weapons. And that is the reason we have anti-ballistic missile bases on their border in order to neutralize their retaliatory capability. And that is the reason for the constant, incessant, outrageous propaganda against them, that we are preparing the entirety of the Western world for war with Russia. It's so obvious. How does anyone miss it? The Russians don't have any trouble seeing it. If you go on YouTube, you will find Putin in press conference after press conference, not just with Russians, but with Western journalists, emphasizing the danger that the journalists themselves are helping to create with all their false reports. He says repeatedly, how do we get through to you what you are doing? You're setting up the world for destruction. He says this over and over to roomfuls of American and European journalists. Why can't you hear? Just go YouTube. There's lots of these. In fact, I think I just posted two on my website. Putin speaks to the prostitutes. I think I called it something like that. It's a new posting. I mean, here you have the president of Russia telling us over and over and over, do you know what you're doing? Do you understand the consequences? Do you think we're going to sit here and wait on some preemptive first strike from you? Do you think we're insane? Do you think we can't protect ourselves? These are the kinds of questions he asks weekly, maybe daily. There's no reporting of it. You know, you do your readers or your listeners a great service if you just start telling them what he says. He's not making threats. He's making pleas. He is pleading with people. Wake up, pay attention, notice the consequences. Why are you doing this? Do you hate all life? He never makes a threat. He asks questions. He makes pleas. Please notice. Please understand. We're not here to be run over by you. We're not going to be run over by you.
If this were the 70s and 80s, do you think the American media would cover such pleas and questions by Brezhnev or Gorbachev?
Sure. Of course.
So you think the CIA or whatever's control over, the deep state's control over the media has just gotten so much more of a chokehold that it's just...
They own them.
They own them, yeah.
They own them. There are books after books demonstrating it. They own all the Western journalists, not just the Americans. They always have. Look, we have the famous stories, story after story. The Paris Review, CIA finance, Encounter, the Congress for Cultural Freedom, Encounter in London, CIA finance. It's endless. We have the testimony of Udo Ulkaki, the German editor. Yes, the CIA handed me stories they wrote. I published them under my name. Every journalist in Europe does this, he says. We all do it. If you look at I think my second to most recent posting on my site, my column, you'll see toward the end the new book by the American demonstrating which specific journalists in which specific instances were used by the CIA. All the big names. The first thing I learned when I was staff associate, House Defense Appropriations Subcommittee with all kinds of secret clearances was the Washington Post is a CIA asset. It always has been. The same can be said for the New York Times. The difference between then and now is that it's not just occasionally they do this for the CIA, but that they do it consistently all day long. Well, Jake, I really need to go.
All right, Dr. Roberts. Thank you very much for coming on the show today. I'd like to direct everyone towards Dr. Roberts' website, paulcraigroberts.org. That's paulcraigroberts.org. He has all his work up there, constantly updating articles, a lot of great stuff. Dr. Roberts, I'd like to give you the floor if you have any article you're going to publish or you've recently published or any message you want to give my audience. Go for it.
Jake, if they go to the site, they'll see it, and I really do need to go now.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Roberts.
Thanks for sharing your audience with me, Jake. We'll talk again sometime.
Thank you, sir. All right. That was Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. We will be right back with Sam Knight of the DistrictSentinel.com. That's Sam Knight with DistrictSentinel.com. We're going to talk geopolitics. It's gonna be a good conversation. Sam is a very, very funny and witty guy, so you'll want to stay tuned for that. And following Sam Knight, we're going to have Wolf Richter of WolfStreet.com with our economics and precious metals report. Wolf Richter is the publisher of WolfStreet.com, a great economic site. So you're going to want to stay tuned for Sam Knight and Wolf Richter. You know, we got two great segments coming up. You just got to hold on just a little bit, and we're going to be right back with a boatload of good conversation with some two smart guys. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with Sam Knight, followed by Wolf Richter of WolfStreet.com. Stay tuned, everybody.